My bird saved my life. Reddit, what has your pet done that changed your life completely? Not exactly a pet, but when I was visiting friends up in Nunavut, there was a moose that used to hang around and get drunk off of fermented apples near their house. It was surprisingly chill with people, probably because it was drunk as frick most of the time. Anyways, one day my friend and I get back to his place and the moose is standing right on his doorstep blocking the door. Only an idiot fricks with a full grown moose, so we let it be and get back in the car to wait for it to leave. After a few minutes a couple of Mounties show up, then a couple more, then more. Up there you don't normally see more than 2 cops at a time, so it was a bit of a strange response to a moose on the doorstep, especially considering we hadn't called anyone. It turns out they weren't there for the moose, they were there for a man who had beaten his girlfriend, stole her shotgun, robbed a store and was last seen being chased by a drunken moose right into my friend's house. If the moose hadn't been blocking the door, the guy probably would have shot us or something. It took the cops hours to get him to come out, and he was absolutely wasted when he did. This makes me proud to be Canadian and have moose around to protect us. I went out for a run around my family's land one morning, as usual, at around 8 AM. My Doberman, Bonnie, runs along with me all the time. I ran with my music on and was completely oblivious to the copperhead that was headed straight for me. It strikes out at me and missed only slightly. When I realize what it was, I panicked and, like my usually clumsy self, fell. It came back and Bonnie jumped in front of it and took the bite herself. Her cry was absolutely horrible. It hurt her right hind leg. She managed to turn around and rip it off, proceeding to tear it apart. Afterwards she fell to the ground and her breathing was getting quicker. I picked her up, as heavy as she was, and ran her to my truck. I drove as fast as I could to the vet. Thankfully I got her there quick enough for them to save her. My dog saved me from that copperhead, and she still lives. I love that dog so much. I also had a dog save me from a copperhead. I was younger, 4 or 5 I guess, and we had this huge German shepherd named Ringo. He started dragging me through the yard by my shirt at a family cookout one time. My whole family freaked out thinking he was attacking me until they noticed the copperhead in the corner of the yard where I was playing. This is why some schools allow students to have animals. MIT. Because they get so depressed and overworked, the only thing that keeps them from committing suicide is the fact that they have somebody that depends on them. At my high school, there was one kid who was autistic and got to have a dog with him. Everyone loved the dog, except for the times when it would crap in the middle of the hallway. Since I've only heard this story, and don't actually remember it, it probably changed my mom's life more than mine. But when I was little we lived on 14 acres right on a riverbank. There was one day that my, very pregnant, mom brought me home from grocery shopping. I was about 2, put me inside, and went back out to get the rest of the groceries. I somehow snuck out the door and wandered down to the river. My mom freaked out when she went into the house and couldn't find me, and headed for the river, sure that I was drowning. She found me standing with my toes on the very edge of the river and our German short-haired pointer sitting very calmly behind me with my shirt in his mouth, holding me back. I probably owe that dog my life. I was visiting family with my mother, and while they were in the house drinking wine and giggling, I went to the backyard, which had a pool. They had a larger dog and I was afraid of dogs at the time. I was about 7. As I was trying to play keep away around the pool to stay as far away from the dog as possible, I fell in. Mind you, this was the 3rd time I had almost drowned in my life. The dog, who I had avoided and treated like crap, jumped in the water. No one heard my gurgled cries evidently, and pulled me close enough to the edge that I got out. I cried for my mother, but she still didn't come out to help. I ended up going inside and I got smacked for going into the pool in my clothes. That was the day that I learned 2 things. I needed to learn how to swim and I was not my mother's favorite child. When I was about 6-7 I lived pretty close to a lake. I was splashing around with my grandma and my German shepherd, long dead now. Unfortunately, there's dozens of little beaches and rarely many people at most of them, so we always picked the one closest to my house. As I was walking out of the lake, some dude runs up and grabs me. I start wailing while he's running off, still holding me. My grandma and I are both freaking out and she couldn't exactly do much. This is Buddy's cue to mouth tackle the back of this dude's leg. He goes down pretty hard, as do I. Have a nice scar on my head from hitting the pavement. I don't remember much, except for my grandma crying, some police, and everyone showering the dog in affection. It was like a cheesy movie, except it all happened really fast. A fake. The guy managed to initially get away after fighting off my dog, but eventually showed up at a hospital for bite wounds and was arrested shortly after. Who knows what could have been had Buddy not been there. The dog loved children and was immediately at attention if me or my cousin started crying, yelling, etc. Best dog I've ever owned. I refer to my dog as my 80-pound personal trainer with ear infections. He keeps me running every day, even when I don't want to. He keeps me running every day, even when I don't want to. Your dog might actually be trying to kill you. I was living with an abusive boyfriend and my cat Buddy. BF abused her, too. She was terrified of any man that came to the apartment, until a friend of a friend came over. She loved him. She'd follow him all over the place. It was funny. I finally got the nerve to kick out the butthole, but needed a place to live. Friend of a friend lost his roommates, so I moved in. We eventually got married and have been for 19 years. 14 of those were shared with Buddy. We both have tats commemorating her. I was going to kill myself. It was late at night and everybody in my house was asleep. I decided that I was going to go to the kitchen and slit my throat. I went to the kitchen and got a knife out of a drawer. Before I went through with it, I wanted to make sure the knife was sharp, so I tested it on my wrist. It was sharper than I anticipated. I cut myself pretty bad. At that moment my dog immediately started to bark his head off. Within what seemed like seconds, my mom was at my side. I was on the ground trying to get my blood off the floor for some reason. I guess I was just panicking. I told the paramedics and my family that cutting my wrist was a suicide attempt. I couldn't bear to tell my family that I was prepared to do something as drastic as cutting my throat. I thought that would just be too much. I believe my dog saved my life that night. He knew I hurt myself and he got me the help I needed. Not as serious as some of the other stories on here. I met my girlfriend of 2 years because of my dog. I was out walking Boots, my dog, in the local park when this cute blonde walks over to say hello. It's not unusual for people to come over to talk to other people's dogs in this park, and she asks the usual questions. Is it a boy or girl? What's his name? And so on. She's crouching down petting him when he barks once or twice, and I said lamely, he asked if he can have your number, but she laughed and gave it to me. I still can't believe it worked, but my life is much better now because of Boots. I'm going to try to put my cats on a leash now. Wish me luck, and send blood transfusions. I guess the best thing my first pet did for me was to teach me about grief and death. The day he was being put down, I knew the time, but still had to go to middle school. I left class to go to the bathroom at that time, really just to be alone. I ran into my brother in the hall. Without talking about it, he decided to do the same thing. We walked silently together, and I felt very solemn and sad, but that life would go on. The day my mother's dog had to be put down, I was at work. I got a call from my mom after she put her down. Right then I burst into tears and had to hide in the back room for an hour before continuing work. I was giving my dog, Mittens, a morning walk a few years ago. He was named after the '08 Romney campaign. My then boyfriend thought it'd be hilarious. Anyway, Mitt was really weirdly determined to keep looking at this one trash can. I tried to get him to keep walking, but he would start growling as soon as I tugged his leash away from it. So I decide to look at what's in there, and I'm surprised I didn't notice the smell or anything before. I guess I had been breathing out when I was close enough. There was an insane amount of flies buzzing around it, and I was just thinking, oh whatever, rotten meat, when I noticed a tiny patch of skin. Being brave, I decided to poke a little more, and that's when I realized it was a tiny arm and hand. I called the police. They pulled out the naked body of a dead 3-year-old boy. Eventually they identified the kid. He was from a few towns over and had gone missing a week before, and the police figure the kidnapper must have driven by at night to drop the body there. They interviewed everyone on my block, but no one said they saw anything suspicious, and as far as I know, they never pinned it on anyone. It still makes me sick thinking about it now. One day my 13-year-old cat figured out that I was controlling the laser pointer. I swear she looked so hurt and betrayed. Not me, but my little brother's dog quite literally saved his life. He was living in a very old house and something went wrong with the wood heating. I apologize for not knowing the exact details that caused his house to fill up with toxic black smoke. My brother was already asleep when this happened, so the carbon monoxide from the smoke just made him unconscious. Brutus, his dog, repeatedly bit his arm until the pain snapped him out of it, and then helped drag him towards the door. He's basically a 140 pounds golden lab version of Lassie. You better wake the frick up or I'm going to tear your goddamn arm off. I had 2 cats at home. One was a Maine Coon, a complete dork but secretly very intelligent, and the other was a very smart Blue Point Siamese. I never had many friends, and the friends I did have weren't interested in hanging out with me outside of school. I didn't have anyone to talk to, so I would socialize with the cats. They kept me company and gave me a reason not to kill myself when I was a depressed teenager. Both amazing cat breeds. Cats are the best. 3. I was crying once, at my computer desk, when my cat jumped into my desk and started rubbing her head against mine. She lied down next to me and rubbed her head against mine until I stopped crying. Then, she lay down on my lap and slept there. I knew I was going to love her forever. That's beautiful. I bought a hamster yesterday for the same reason. I have my low times, but I thought having one thing that needed me would help me through. Today I came home to find her trembling in a puddle of her own urine because my mum turned the TV volume to the max with her right next to it and it was terrifying her. I moved her to my quiet room of course, but knowing I failed her already is not a good feeling. I'm so glad your experience turned out better. Good for you. Got a call from my mom while at school that she found my 7-year-old cat dead in our backyard in his favorite chair. I'm 17 years old but could barely help crying the 30-minute drive home, and lost it when I saw him. My grandmom died when I was around 5 years old, so I barely realized what had happened, and other than that, my cat was the first creature I was close to that passed away. It was a reality check, and I now cherish the people I have around me. I suffer from severe PTSD, agoraphobia, and panic attack anxiety disorder after 2 tours of duty to Iraq. My family has since moved away from me as well to another state so that my son may attend school. My German Shepherd is literally the only friend in the world that I have left. It's kind of sad really. In a way it's comforting, but at the same time without him I don't think I could even function or continue to make it day to day. I lived on a small farm. Every once in a while cows would get out. Not really anything crazy with us having a relatively large portion of land. Typically we could get them back in with some corn or hay. This particular time, a bull got out. I was young and home alone. I go out to bring it in, which I typically do with the cows even at that age. I go out, do my usual routine. The bull wasn't having any of it. It started acting far more aggressive. At this point I backed up a bit, which was probably a bad idea. The bull lowered its head and started coming towards me. Out of nowhere my border collie, Cosmo, jumps between us, attacked the bull on the nose, dodged its rams, and returned back at its face. This stopped the bull in its tracks, turning its attention from me to the dog. Cosmo rounded it, snapped at its tail, and put pressure on its sides. By the end of the short, yet seemingly long, period of time, the dog had brought the bull to the gate so I could close it on him. My cat was rolling in gravel. When you've got an itchy back, you've got an itchy back. Depressed because losing job, health issues, cheating husband, but every morning my 2 dogs got me up and going. Man's best friend proven in millions of people's lives every day. I had a severe depressive episode earlier this year and I sat at my couch staring at a glass of water while holding a fistful of pills when my tiny pug puppy crawled into my lap. He just sat there and stared up into my face and began to lick my chin and I just couldn't do it with him looking at me like that. I put the pills away and just cuddled my puppy on the couch for a while. This is not a pet story, but it has a critter that saved my bacon. Around 20 years ago I was severely depressed, hooked on H, and decided to end my life. Without any emotion I had tied a bunch of electric cords together and sat there staring at a blank television screen. I decided to give prayer a shot, and so I told God that if I was supposed to be alive that he'd better send someone now because otherwise this thing, me hanging myself, was going to happen. It was just one sentence. Instantly another pair of eyes met mine and it didn't seem real, but those eyes were shiny and alive and looking right at me. It was a mouse. Right where I had glazed out, a mouse had peeked from the side of the turned off television. Whiskers, pale brown little body, everything. And it was like time stopped. And it was the kindest, gentlest thing. And we sat there looking at each other. And I had my answer. Not today. Yep, that one hit. Not me, but my best friend a few years ago had a really bad breakup with his girlfriend when she left for college. The relationship was always bad and the distance just made it horrible. Constant arguing and screaming. One day they're arguing on the phone upstairs while I was in his basement. I hear him yelling, then stop, and then something hit the ground hard. I run upstairs and he's collapsed, convulsing, having a panic attack and unable to breathe. He's just shaking. His dad, mom, and I crying over him, begging him to stop, telling him to breathe. It was so scary. Just then his dog runs in and starts licking his feet, and somehow he just starts laughing, coughing and laughing, but able to breathe again. Apparently she had just broken him down emotionally and he couldn't handle it. God, I hate that sea. But that day his dog really saved his life. There's an old lady at my church who throws her hands in the air. I'm a nurse every time something happens involving pain. This dog reminded me of her. Breath, start breathing, damn it, cry. Don't worry, I'm a dog. I used to have really bad anxiety attacks. A few months ago I got my dog and he has helped me to stay calm and not get stressed as much. He keeps me grounded and happy. Just being alive and in my home, seeing him every day makes my day a little bit better. Most all of the animals I have had have changed my life in some way. My two dogs growing up, Chief and Tipo, were always there for me when I was sad and just couldn't do it anymore. One time the very first guy I thought I loved broke up with me. I cried for so long and me being a stupid kid wanted to kill myself, so I grabbed pills and some water. My two pups came in and right as I was going to drink the water, Chief flopped by my side and Tipo gave me a hug. She would put her head into your chest. This spilt the water all over them and me. They both looked at me with water all over their faces. I couldn't help but laugh and hold them. After that, whenever I felt sad, they were the ones I would turn to. When I was much younger, my family had a couple of puppies that we were trying to find homes for. My mom worked at the local animal clinic and so my sister and I took them there to give them a bath to look pretty for their new owners. Just as I started to open the back room door, the puppy in my arms wrapped both front paws around my arm, started trembling violently, and whined. I paused to see if I could figure out what was wrong, only to look down and see through the crack in the door I had been opening the iron, silently snarling jaws of the German Shepherd police dog that was being boarded there. He had escaped his run and had the entire back room under his dominion. If my sister and I had walked into that room, we would have undoubtedly been attacked. My mom was unable to reach his handler and in the end had to drug him with a pill buried in cheese before she could get in to confine him again. I will never forget that little puppy. I wish we could have kept him. Was really in a big depression after my first real, non-junior high, girlfriend broke up with me. My cat, who was usually distant with everyone but my dad, would sleep with me every night and always want to be near me. Little guy cheered me up so much. R.I.P. Smokey. I have a kitty named Smokey. I call him my Smokey Bear. I love him. My dog saved my life simply by being there for me. Back in 2008, I went through a devastating breakup with my girlfriend. We had been together for 7 years, living together for 3, and I had proposed to her about 2 weeks prior. We were kind of forced to separate for a few months for work, but were still getting together on the weekends. She said yes to the marriage proposal. Then 2 weeks later she broke up with me. I knew it was commitment panic, so we kept hanging out on the weekends. But then my father decided to stick his nose into things. One weekend on my way back from visiting her, he called up her new boyfriend's house. Then he called him at work. I wasn't aware of any of this until I got a call from her, madder than I had ever seen her before. I lost all hope that things could be worked out. I had a 2-hour drive ahead of me to think and feel sorry for myself. About an hour and a half into my tear-filled drive, I had serious thoughts of driving off the bridge I was crossing. At that point my dog climbed into the front seat and put his head in my lap. Maybe he just didn't want to die. I have this cat Snowball who has always been very human-like. Her mannerisms, the way she seems to understand me when I'm talking to her, how she sniffs out my bad feels from across the house and always comes running to cuddle with me. She's never gotten sick, ever, knock on wood. I've even seen her open unlocked doors. I've had her for about 12 years, and we've been best friends since day one. I moved off to college and she stayed with my mom, who had recently separated from my dad and was living in the old house with just my little sister. Snowball always tried to come into her room while she was asleep to cuddle with her, but it would make her sneeze, so she put her outside the room and shut the door. One night my mom put her outside, shut the door and went to sleep as usual. A few hours later she woke up because Snowball jumped on top of her, meowed loudly and started clawing at her face. Naturally she jumped out of bed, freaked out, and opened the door to let Snowball out into the house. Then she smelled smoke. Snowball led her to the living room, where she could see through the glass doors that the bird pen outside was on fire. She called 911 and firemen showed up soon after to put it out. No birds were harmed, and my mom and sister were safe. What freaks me out is that the door was still closed when my mom was woken up by Snowball, and she specifically remembers having closed her out of the bedroom as usual that night. I love that cat to death. A part of me believes that she's magical. I hate to tell you this, but your cat set the fire. You have been visited by the Wealth Rat. Subscribe in 12 seconds and he will share his wealth with you. Like and subscribe, you magnificent person.